Some matches are so iconic, it's hard to know exactly where to start. It's probably best to just go back to the time when the match that's the subject of this particular vid was announced, and well, the whole IWC went loopy. I sure as hell went loopy. Kenta Kobashi's going to be coming to America, and it's going to be a Ring of Honor show, and it's going to be against frickin' Samoa Joe? The expectations for this event were already off the charts, to a level that surely, when you think about it soberly, it was going to be impossible to actually reach. And then the most amazing thing happened. They did reach that level. Samoa Joe versus Kenta Kobashi on October 1st, 2005 at the Grand Ballroom in New York was and is one of the most exceptional wrestling bouts ever caught on video, and I can only imagine just what it was like for the 800 or so in attendance that night. The lucky ones who've talked about it basically speak of nothing but sheer ear-popping delirium that, even if the record of the match does a fine job of trying to capture, can't truly be done justice. One of the legendary matches of American indie wrestling in a truly special period, covering it is a no-brainer. Now obviously this match itself is the centrepiece, although there's a few other things to look at here too. How it all took place, Kobashi's thoughts going in, as well as a couple of other little more obscure bouts that take us away from the big ROH classic, as Noah tried to make a good impression overseas. Now I guess you could say that this was, albeit around 15 or so years after it would have usually happened, Kenta Kobashi's foreign excursion. Happily this young lion was able to turn a fair few heads overseas. Let's get going. Perhaps an ideal place to start here would be a little look at the few times before Kobashi that Japanese talents had come over to Ring of Honor. Attracting Puro guys had certainly been a priority for the company early on because, well, Ring of Honor had always been about attracting that, for lack of a better descriptor, serious sort of wrestling fan. You know, the ones who would absolutely go on incessantly about the best things happening in Noah, NJPW and AJPW, and how much better they were than anything American, even to the point of irritation. People who probably had this classic animated GIF in their message board signature. That said, back in those bad old days, during the time of Katie Vick and the Kiss My Ass Club, there's obviously nothing remotely wrong with having a promotion based around actual respect for professional wrestling, especially when the wrestling itself was generally so damn good. Puroresu was a big inspiration for Ring of Honor, Puro fans was exactly who they wanted to appeal to, and even before Kobashi came over, the company had seen a couple of legends and, well, not so legends, with the results being something of a mixed bag. On the 9th of November 2002, 01 would basically be the main event of All-Star Extravaganza, which is actually one of the very best shows from ROH's first year. You've got a thoroughly excellent tag team of eternal ultra hard-ass Masato Tanaka and junior legend Shinjiro Otani against the American team of Low Ki and Steve Corino, although both Ki and Corino were, of course, regulars on 01 tours. The match itself ends up being pretty cool. You certainly get all the good stuff that you're familiar with from all four guys, from big Otani hope spots to stiff Ki kicks, Corino forever being the slick dick, and Tanaka being absolute iron. As you would expect, the Japanese team does win after a misplaced Ki kick poleaxes Corino, and a lariat followed by Otani's spiral bomb seals the deal. In giving 01 the main event of their show, Ring of Honor certainly gave a huge amount of shine to the Japanese promotion, perhaps more than they really should have, although one presumes 01 insisted. In the end, being the main event didn't actually do them a lot of favours. Not only is this card damn near all excellent from top to bottom, these guys had to follow up an absolutely stunning #1 contender semi-main between AJ Styles and American Dragon, the pair's first career meeting and the first of many classics between the two. That said, they still did a very good job indeed. Final Battle 2003, on December 27th, saw the second half of the show taken up by ROH going up against All Japan, complete with a main event for All Japan's World Tag Titles starring Keiji Muto as the Great Muta, teaming with Awashi against the Prophecies Christopher Daniels and Dan Maff. This main event is, naturally, the weakest of the 4 ROH vs All Japan bouts. It's the sort of thing that doesn't really go too far beyond exhibition, which is kind of a common theme with a lot of these clashes. It's almost best as a reminder of a time when Arashi, or Isao Takagi, was actually flying pretty high in All Japan, high enough to be tag champs with Muta and even a Champion Carnival finalist. Muta naturally gets all his crowd popping spots in from mists to flash elbows and ends up getting the win with the Shining Wizard. The other 3 matches are definitely the more curious ones here though. We get a tag bout between the Second City Saints, CM Punk and Colt Cabana, against Turmeric Storm, the team of Kazushi Miyamoto and Tomoki Honma. A young Honma is certainly the most intriguing part of this bout and, well, because he is Tomoki Honma, the match finishes with surely the nastiest looking Pepsi plunge ever, one that Honma decides to take directly onto his skull. Jesus Christ, dude. Cool match, mind. Elsewhere, AJ Styles takes on Kaz Hayashi in a match with shades of the very last weeks of WCW in another decent bout, with the commentary mentioning that Kaz was actually the first ever person to take the Styles Clash, and AJ ends up hitting Hayashi with it again to win here. And we also get an entertaining contest between Homicide and Satoshi Kojima. In a battle of Koji cutters and lariats, it's Kojima who eventually wins out and presumably celebrates with a big loaf of bread afterwards. In the end, the mini ROH vs AJPW series ends on as even with 2 matches apiece, and it results in plenty more good than bad. As for New Japan, that leads to a couple of shows, with the highlight undoubtedly being the Weekend of Thunder. Jushin Liger comes over for a pretty high profile duo of bouts in front of a very appreciative crowd indeed, with Liger being so well known, loved and influential when it comes to a promotion like ROH. Naturally this goes down a treat. The singles match between Liger and Bryan Danielson that headlines Night 1 actually has a bit of story, with American Dragon having had previous success in New Japan and even holding the junior heavyweight title there, but never pinning Liger. Danielson happily heals it up in this bout, which is never not awesome, and it ends up being a very good match. However, Danielson comes up short against Liger again despite pulling out all the stops, getting pinned after a super brainbuster. Night 2 saw a more exhibition-like tag bout with Liger and Samoa Joe against Danielson and Low Ki, and while this one's certainly a lot more about everyone getting all their stuff in, again the crowd laps it all up, and it's certainly entertaining. We end up with Liger winning again, pinning Danielson once more after a running Liger bomb after Dragon got appropriately beaten up by Joe. The Weekend of Thunder turned out pretty okay, and with it consisting of a singles match and then a tag bout, it's obviously the closest equivalent to what we're going to see when Kobashi comes over. But then, on the other side of things, we've got the Best of the American Super Juniors tournament from April 2nd, 2005. This is actually the second of 2 one-night tournaments, different to the regular BOTSJ format, with the first happening in New Japan's original American outpost, the Santa Monica-based Inoki Dojo, in 2004. That whole thing's available on YouTube and is actually a rather curious record of early 2000s indie talents, both famous and forgotten. That first one was won by Danielson, and he participates here alongside Spanky, Matt Sydal, Alex Shelley, Roderick Strong, and James Gibson, with the New Japan contingent consisting of Black Tiger, as played by Rocky Romero, and Dragon Soldier B, aka Kendo Kashin, a somewhat older git who'd recently returned as a New Japan regular. It all looks fine on paper, but then the booking happens, and Kendo Kashin ends up getting to the final. Now, while Kashin's a perfectly okay wrestler, his ultra-grounded, technical, comedic-ish style is absolutely not the sort that plays well with ROH fans circa 2005, and his bouts get nothing in the way of positive response. More than that, his path to the final consists of cheating to win against Matt Sydal and a semi-final against James Gibson where Gibson was already injured and Spanky eventually had to throw in the towel. On the other side, Black Tiger beats Alex Shelley and then defeats Danielson in a run-back of the first tournament's final. So yeah, Black Tiger and Kendo Kashin contest the final, which isn't exactly the matchup that ROH fans expected, or indeed wanted. More than that, the utterly hated by this point Kashin wins the whole thing following his admittedly sweet top rope cross arm breaker, and is happy to heel it up while the fans chant "Don't come back" at him. There's a fair bit of backstage intrigue here, as you'd expect. Inoki Office was very much in control of the tournament, and ROH did kind of try to persuade them that Kashin wasn't going to go down well as winner, or that Black Tiger vs Kashin wasn't going to be a good final. However, New Japan's president, Simon Inoki, refused to be budged on the matter, and so we ended up with a bit of a stinker. And so that just about takes us to the upcoming appearance of Kobashi. We've certainly had some bad stuff here, although to be fair there is a lot of good. The common theme though is still a series of matches that largely play out as exhibitions, with not much in the way of follow-up. Kobashi is also something of a different kettle of fish entirely. The biggest Japanese stars to appear in the company before him, those being Tanaka, Muta and Liger, were of course already pretty well known for their American exploits, all having appeared pretty regularly in the West for ECW and WCW, whereas Kobashi? Well, he hadn't ever wrestled outside of Japan. As alluded to previously, Kenta Kobashi didn't have the foreign excursion that big prospect talents like him would have been expected to go on in their younger days. And so, come September of 2005, when he sets off for this brief little excursion, well, it's not like there's anything to look back on. This feels so much more like a total one-off, something that you would better make the most of, because it sure as hell isn't likely to happen again. The match between Kobashi and Samoa Joe was officially announced by ROH at the end of August, although it was in and around the middle of July when it became known in those good old rag sheets that Kobashi was going to be coming over and working the October 1st and 2nd dates for the promotion. Having got Kobashi, a lot of the wrangling from there was more a question of just who Kenta Kobashi was actually going to face. In fact, Kobashi vs Joe wasn't necessarily the original plan. The worry about such a match, especially from a traditionalist point of view, is that obviously Kenta Kobashi is not going to be coming over to lose, and Samoa Joe was the company's biggest star. Traditionally, you would never have your big home star job to someone who's just coming in for this sort of shot, unless it was in some sort of screwy fashion. However, that sort of screwy finish, even a draw, isn't something that an ROH crowd is likely to accept. This is a promotion that prides itself on clean finishes. So if it wasn't going to be Joe facing Kobashi, then the other logical option would have been Low Ki, with the Joe and Kobashi encounter then happening in a tag. Ki was still one of the company's big names, was not in possession of any kind of title, something that automatically ruled out Bryan Danielson, who'd recently become ROH World Champ, and seeing as Ki already worked with Noah regularly, there was hardly going to be any political issues here. The snags with Ki, though, were the big difference in size between himself and Kobashi presenting a major clash, as well as him only being able to work one date on the weekend. He was already booked for a One Pro Wrestling show in the UK on October the 1st. It's all a bit of tricky balancing and booking. In the end, Gabe Sapolsky decided to eschew wrestling tradition. It's going to be Joe against Kobashi, with the promise that the finish is going to be clean. And there is still room for Low Ki, of course. The October 2nd tag match will see Low Ki and Samoa Joe teaming up to take on Kenta Kobashi and Homicide. Even Low Ki and Joe were enemies in ROH's booking at the time, this weekend is seen as special enough to, at least temporarily, forget about storyline considerations in favour of giving the fans the best possible matchups available, seeing as this is surely a one-time thing. October 1st and 2nd were the only two dates they could get for Kobashi. The main reason behind all of this happening in the first place was Noah's wish to expand their international presence. A pretty worthy cause indeed, seeing as Noah broadcasts and packaged shows were actually available in a good few places outside of Japan, such as the legendary and much missed Wrestling Channel here in the UK. Anyone else ever get the nostalgic urge to revisit those brilliant Kobashi, Jushin Liger and Miko Satomura highlight MVs? Anyway, I digress. 2005 was definitely a year where Noah stars could be found in a fair few places all over the world, and a big part of the charge was spearheaded by none other than the boss man himself. While Mitsuharu Misawa wasn't yet appearing in ROH, he had his own little excursion earlier in 2005, mainly centred around Europe. First off, we've got a couple of UK shows. On March the 18th, Misawa was up in Scotland for a tag bout in British Championship Wrestling, where he teams with regular tag partner Yoshinari Ogawa against Doug Williams and Stevie Knight. Now, if you think that Kobashi wrestling in front of 800 people in ROH is a small sounding crowd, seeing Misawa here in front of what looks like around 100 tops may well be an even bigger shock to the system. It's a tiny yet appreciative crowd that rocked up to the Karluk District Hall to see Misawa's team naturally win, with Ogawa pinning Knight on a backdrop hold. Odd but interesting. Also, Misawa may or may not have, with presumably no other options available, urinated into a bin backstage. I am unable to confirm this right now, but I'll update you all if necessary. The next night is much more high profile. FWA's International Showdown, broadcast on the aforementioned wrestling channel. Here we've got a 6-man contest. Misawa, Ogawa and Tiger Emperor, aka Kotaro Suzuki, going against Doug Williams, James Ty and Too Cold Scorpio. It should be noted that Doug Williams and Too Cold Scorpio are both Noah Tour regulars, and the Anarchist himself had stakes in the Frontier Wrestling Alliance, so presumably he was instrumental in getting this put together. This is another entertaining enough exhibition, certainly not the sort of thing that would make waves on a Noah card, but definitely fun for the 3,400 fans at the Coventry Skydome. Doug's team actually get the win here. Williams pins Tiger Emperor following a Chaos Theory. A fine match on what was actually a very fine card. International Showdown was basically chock full of big names, with AJ Styles and Chris Daniels main eventing, a Samoa Joe vs CM Punk match, Raven doing hardcore things, and, best of all, a classic World of Sport match with Steve Gray going up against Mal Sanders. Essentially, it was a showcase of the things that the Wrestling Channel had to offer, from TNA to ROH, Noah to classic World of Sport broadcasts, happily without a 3-hour break in the afternoon for bloody Psychic Interactive. God, I miss the Wrestling Channel. The following day, Misawa went to Germany for a match in WXW. Here the team of Misawa and Tiger Emperor would actually lose once again to Ares and Ahmed Sher. I presume that once again Tiger Emperor was the one eating the pin. Misawa leaving Europe with a 1-2 record? Shocking stuff. Kenta Kobashi himself is going to be taking a trip to Europe on his little excursion, but that's not the only consideration here, nor are bigger indie promotions like ROH the only consideration. Another big consideration was the smaller yet quite important feeder promotions that Noah worked with, the likes of Harley Racer's World League Wrestling and Noah tag team Michael Modest and Donovan Morgan's Pro Wrestling Iron. These places tend to be where Noah sends their younger wrestlers off for experience outside of Japan, and so naturally they're going to get the odd visit from more established talents here and there. Misawa himself had already made 3 appearances for PWI in 2002 and 2004. On the 2nd August 2002, he and Ogawa would defeat the team of Doug Williams and Vinny Massaro. Bloody hell, the Anarchist doesn't half get about, does he? Ogawa pins Massaro here with a backdrop hold. Misawa had 2 further appearances for PWI in 2004. On 11th of June, there's a GHC tag title defence with Misawa and Ogawa against Bart Blackson and another bloody Brit. And this time it's only Nigel McGuinness in it, sunshine. Obviously, Misawa and Ogawa successfully defended those titles thanks to the old classic Misawa Tiger Driver on Blackson. The third and last bout is a 6-man on the following day, with more odd names. The team of Donovan Morgan, Mike Modest and Ryan Drago, who you likely know better as Simon Gotch or Simon Grimm, take on Misawa, Ogawa and Sal Tomaselli, and Misawa's team losers with Morgan pinning Tomaselli off a Tiger Driver 98. These sorts of strange occurrences and highly obscure names are exactly the reason why I love doing these videos. Kenta Kobashi would have likely made an appearance for Pro Wrestling Iron on his own tour. However, right around the time the tour happened, Modest, Morgan and their partner Brian Murdoch decided to close the promotion. Harley Racer's Missouri-based WLW, or World League Wrestling, was and indeed still is one of those promotions that's based quite heavily around a training school, and Noah would send a fair few wrestlers here for some foreign experience and indeed some tutelage from the master. Takeshi Morishima, notably, was pretty well featured here, having won WLW's championship twice in 2003 and 2004, so the relationship here was pretty strong. Indeed, Misawa had already been here in August of 2004, teaming with Ogawa and defeating the team of Ace Steel and Jason Bates. And WLW would actually be where Kenta Kobashi made his first American appearance, wrestling Wade Chisholm on the 24th of September at the Eldon Community Centre. Now, unfortunately, not much record of this match is around, aside from a couple of clips, but according to reports it was quite a good one, and the crowd was pretty appreciative, with lots of chanting for Kobashi. Harley Race went to some length to present Kobashi as one of the world's greatest, and following Kobashi's victory, the man himself would come to the ring, call him Mr. Puroresu, which was what the press called Harley Race when he wrestled in Japan, and actually presented Kobashi with his NWA heavyweight title. Naturally, Kobashi did hand it back afterwards, out of respect. There's a couple of other intriguing historical tidbits here. Firstly, Kobashi was accompanied on this tour by Kenta and an injured Naomichi Marufuji, with Kenta also competing on this WLW card and the three of them taking a training camp. Secondly, as reported in The Observer, a certain John Laurinaitis was also at the show. He and Kobashi did previously team together in All Japan, and this was their first meeting since Lowe's days. The dynamic dude did talk to the Japanese press about how the WWE would love to have Kobashi come and face the likes of Kurt Angle, Triple H or The Undertaker. A pretty thing to say, seeing as there was obviously no frickin' chance of such a thing occurring. Thirdly, we also have a 21-year-old Kenny Omega on the card, who was here to take part in the aforementioned training camp. He's spoken in an interview with Monthly Pro-Res about having a brief and positive interaction with Kobashi and Laurinaitis while they were watching him spar, where they were joking about potentially signing him up. The connection with Noah and WLW and Kobashi's trip there also brings up another possibility. While there was obviously zero chance of Kobashi doing anything in WWE, there was a chance that he could have done something with TNA, who Race also had connections with. Noah had actually let TNA know that if they would like to use Kobashi on a pay-per-view, they'd be open to it so long as it didn't clash with his obviously very busy Noah schedule. However, TNA declined, largely because their main Japanese relationship was with New Japan and they didn't want to spoil that. So, with all the preparation just about in place, we're about ready for the match itself. In the Japanese press, Kenta Kobashi made sure to say that Samoa Joe was a big deal indeed and that he was intensely preparing for the bout, watching tapes and doing research. And why not? These are two of the most successful wrestlers about at the time, after all. Both Kobashi and Joe had only recently come off their lengthy world title reigns, with Joe leading Ring of Honor through some mighty lows, but when he lost the belt, the promotion was stronger than ever. He's someone that deserves respect, and Joe himself has already indicated that he's not just going to roll over for Kobashi. This, after all, is his house. The fact that this is a singles match already does make this seem like a big deal, especially when you consider that Misawa, on the various shows that we've just seen, only ever wrestled in tags and trios. Privately, according to both Joe and Kobashi after the fact, Kobashi did wonder just what sort of reaction he would get from the crowd. He was well aware of just how big a star Samoa Joe was in Ring of Honor, and he actually didn't think that he'd get cheered. He thought that the American crowd wouldn't know who he was. And so, when talking with Joe, he wondered if he should play the heel and be like Mr. Fuji, according to Samoa Joe, who spoke about the match on Steve Austin's show. Joe tried to say, in somewhat broken Japanese, to trust that he was a big babyface and that if they both went out there and did their thing, it would be fine. We'll kick ass. Also, as evidenced by this picture, Kenta Kobashi took in some classic American cuisine before the show. He ate at a Wendy's. The show itself at the Grand Ballroom is simply called Joe vs Kobashi, and it is about as much of a one-match card as you would expect a show called Joe vs Kobashi to be, really. There is a tag title change, although this was during a period where those belts were kind of an afterthought, as in before Austin Aries and Roderick Strong got hold of them. The only other significant development of the weekend, really, is that it's James Gibson's last two shows in ROH before returning to WWE. He's had an absolutely stunning run of 8 months in the company, including winning the world title off of CM Punk, and he has his farewell speech tonight after a match with Jimmy Yan. It's mainly a few tasters before the main event, and by the time Bobby Cruz comes out to announce that it's time here in New York City, the crowd's more than ready for it, with the Kobashi chants already ringing out. Mama Said Knock You Out comes on, and Joe's out first, naturally to the big and head-bopping Joe, Joe, Joe reaction that you'd expect. But still, when Blazin' starts playing and the lights go down, the crowd's right on the precipice of losing control. And when Kobashi actually comes out, well, some things speak for themselves. We've not even rang the bell, and this is already one of the most beautiful moments in all of pro wrestling. Let's not forget who this guy is. This is Kenta Kobashi, headliner at the Budokan many times over, a main eventer at the Tokyo Dome in front of 58,000 people. And this ear-shattering war from the 800 in NYC's Grand Ballroom is enough to clearly take him aback. Yeah, they sure did know who he was alright. It shocks Kobashi enough to raise his arms jobber style, like he's Special Delivery Jones or something. This is just a treasure, really. I could watch this entrance over and over for the sheer wave of love that hits Kobashi as he steps through the curtain. Just amazing. It continues all the way through into the introductions, which will, of course, feature lots of streamers. Streamers themselves were pretty common for ROH main events, as well as toilet paper if your name's the late great Jimmy Rave, but it's certainly something else to make Kobashi feel at home. The match itself will not have any commentary. Frankly, with a crowd that's this electric, the match doesn't need any. So, as the traditional code of honour is followed, let's break it down. Most of the matches we've seen so far have admittedly been little more than exhibitions. The thought of this being one is quashed from the very first move, when Joe aims a kick at Kobashi's well-known weak spot, his mega-surgically repaired knees. These shots are then followed by a big slap from Joe to Kobashi on a rope break, and the big "oh" from the crowd is enough to signify that this is going to be a serious fight. We get a face-to-face, shove-in, some chops, and the first majorly impactful move. Joe takes Kobashi over and follows with a big shoulder charge. Kobashi retreats to the outside and Joe hits a baseball slide, followed up with his awesome elbow suicida. The fight is most definitely on, and the message from Joe is clear. This is his house. Back in the ring, Joe hits an elbow and works Kobashi over with a chin lock, but then he also locks in a stretch plum. A nice little nod to Kawada there, but Kobashi quickly makes the ropes. Joe then tries to take Kobashi at his own game with chops in the corner, and that's when Kobashi gets that look on his face. The one that's best described as, "This hurts, but also fuck you." Kobashi's chops and Joe's kicks absolutely echo through the ballroom, and it's Joe's kicks that get the advantage after he nails a gunman-giri. The chests of both guys are reddening fast as Joe continues the dangerous K-roll. He uses Kawada kicks, but Kobashi is up, shouting and responding with rapid chops. The look on Joe's face says that even if he may have seen this thousands of times on video, it's another thing entirely in person. Joe gets Kobashi down again after some nasty Takayama-esque knees, but he's got to go to his knees himself. All this and we're only 5 minutes in. Any "this is awesome" chants are very much justified. Joe hits his chop to the back, kick and knee drop combo, continuing to press the advantage on the outside. It's the stuff that dreams are made of. Joe gets to land the big ole 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 kick on Kobashi. Is this real? Reality crashes in on Joe's second one, as Kobashi counters with a beast of a chop to the neck. Suddenly it's Joe sitting on the chair, and what can only be described as an ole chop sends him over the railing. Kobashi punishes further with a DDT on the outside floor, and all those little moves of Kobashi, the whip around to the crowd as he gets back up, they just have that much more impact in a venue like this, with this crowd. He's loving it as he delivers more knife-edge based punishment to Joe on the ropes, particularly the woos that come along each time, and Kobashi turns him around for the big burning sword chop to the neck, with more to come on the ground. It's only a 2 low, and there's more work to do. Kobashi attempts to go for a brainbuster, but Joe is able to reverse for a suplex of his own, Bret Hart style. The chops and kicks continue to be meted out, and this time we explode into a pure chop battle. We're a couple of months removed from Kobashi and Kensuke Sasaki's greatest chop battle of all time at Noah's Destiny show, but these strikes and this crowd could probably be heard all the way over in the Big Egg. As Kobashi wins the battle with a final massive chop, his handprint is already very much visible on Joe's chest. You certainly get a good look at it when Kobashi locks in an abdominal stretch. That's gonna sting for a while. Kobashi continues to strike down with furious anger, resulting in another near fall, and now he's trying to twist Joe's head off with a face lock. Shades of Misawa, perhaps? Nasty 12-6 chop right to the top of the head as Kobashi continues the advantage and hits the rapid fire chops to the neck, but Joe counters the discus chop follow-up with an STO to finally claw something back. A senton, and suddenly it's Kobashi in the corner, with Joe hitting the chop and punch combo. Another legend referenced, this time Genichiro Tenryu. Joe's getting back in there and this already feels so epic. All this action and we're only just getting to around 15 minutes in. Joe hits some more nasty kicks and plants Kobashi with a powerbomb to the corner, utterly mangling Kobashi in there, and then getting in for another of his favourites, the face wash, as previously mastered by Shinjiro Otani. As you can see, a lot of Joe's spots have masses of Puro inspiration, but he executes them so well to make them his own, and it's one of the reasons why he's such a perfect opponent here. Joe senses the opportunity and lifts Kobashi to the corner, locks him in, and hits the muscle buster. However, Kobashi kicks out at 2.9. Joe thought he had him, and some of the crowd might have thought he had him too. Joe hits a powerbomb and runs through submissions, going straight into an STF. As Kobashi inches towards the ropes, Joe tries everything to stop it, transitioning from the STF into a crossface, and then into an octopus hold, but eventually Kobashi, with the will of the crowd behind him, makes it. Joe looks for a big assault in the corner, but Kobashi counters with a chop, gets behind, and hits the half Nelson suplex. Huge roar! Slowly both wrestlers get up, but Kobashi's there first, a discus chop sends Joe to the corner, and then, well, it's machine gun time. Chop after chop after chop after chop. Just when you think it's slowing down, it speeds up again. Must be about 80 of them. The crowd is beyond delirium. Viciously double chopping now onto the mincemeat that is Joe's chest, and Joe then gets clattered with another half Nelson suplex. However, he's just able to get a hand on the ropes. Joe tries for a final rally, hitting elbows, running the ropes, but Kobashi reverses and locks the neck. Joe tries to fight but cannot, and oh my word, it's the frickin' sleeper suplex. Lord only knows how, but Joe kicks out again. Kobashi roars and calls for the end. Again, Joe tries to rally with slaps, but a lariat attempt is blocked viciously. 3 discus chops, Kobashi roars once again. Kenta Kobashi defeats Samoa Joe in 23 minutes 42, following his finishing lariat. Jay Lethal comes in to give Joe the appropriate assistance as the chants for Kobashi roll around the arena, and eventually, with Joe up, we get the handshake and the embrace. It's one hell of a moment, and Kobashi acknowledges the crowd, bowing to them all as they chant arigato at him. What a skirmish. This is just one of those special moments in wrestling where everything comes together perfectly, one of those matches that reminds you why you love it so much. After all, it's not like it had to be this way. Kenta Kobashi could have come out there, wrestled at a leisurely pace, done the spots everyone knows and all that. It could have easily just been another exhibition, and the fans would have still been happy. Instead, Kobashi and Joe went out there and delivered a 23-minute war, one where both of them would come away with a few scars. We've seen the marks on Joe, and Kobashi broke a tooth during the encounter, but it's just beyond all expectations. In 2005, both of these guys were on the elite level of pro wrestling, and they couldn't not put on a showing worthy of that standing. But of course, there's a third star here. one of the most amazing crowds in the history of pro wrestling. These guys were absolutely on fire for every last move in the bout. They didn't stop from Bobby Cruise announcing that it was main event time to well beyond the finish. Getting to hear them without any commentary is a perfect decision on ROH's part. It's never going to be the same as being there, and you're damn fortunate if you were, but it's as close as you can get. This is one of those nights where everyone, without exception, over-delivered, and the post-match is a thing of beauty too. As Kobashi himself has tweeted in the past, he will never forget the arigato call at the venue. Joe says backstage that the crowd wanted it, they got it, and that no matter how often his neck's going to click for the rest of his life, he gave it his all out there for the sport he loved, and he cheers Kobashi. On his live journal, he simply said that he and Kobashi should do it again sometime, and while unfortunately we didn't get that big singles rematch, this one is certainly enough to leave a hell of a legacy. Plenty of people have talked about how this match was either their introduction to ROH, or indeed their introduction to Kobashi, and that it was the start of a beautiful journey. It's often called the Rock vs Hogan of the Indies, and especially with the crowd, I think that's a pretty apt comparison. Reaction to this match was, of course, universally positive. It did get a 5-star rating from The Observer at a time when such things were a bit rarer, but this was actually the third 5-star that Joe had earned inside a 12-month period, the other two being Joe vs CM Punk 2 from 16th of October 2004, and the TNA Unbreakable 3-way between Joe, AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels on 11th of September 2005. Now of course that's only Big Dave's opinion, but he's undoubtedly a white-hot wrestler, and you won't find much comment on this bout either from the time or from now that isn't absolutely filled with love. In fact, it's often been cited as the greatest match in Ring of Honor's history. With Joe and Kobashi catching lightning in a bottle with such a phenomenal match, one that occurred at the perfect time when Joe was still at his peerless indie peak, and Kobashi was still one of the best and still on a full schedule, in front of that crowd, it is easy to forget about his other match in Ring of Honor, which would happen the very next night on October the 2nd. We're in ROH's mainstay, the National Guard Armory in Philly, in front of 1,000 people for Unforgettable, with the main event tag match seeing Kobashi and Homicide up against Joe and Low Ki. Unforgettable as a card is probably worth watching more than the one-match affair that was Joe vs Kobashi. There is some pretty good wrestling across the board here, as well as a bit of storyline movement, with this being Jim Cornette's first show as ROH's on-screen commissioner. There's more on how that would play out in my ROH vs CZW series, which you can find on my Patreon. Indeed, the tag match might not actually be the best match on this night. It has very stiff competition from James Gibson's final match in the company, a stunning 30-minute war where he ends up going out on his back and passing the mantle over to the Misawa of the Backbreaker, Roderick Strong. Still, based on the previous night's show and that frickin' match, you should probably expect that this tag bout is going to deliver the goods. The match itself has some other intrigue along with Kobashi being in the ring. Obviously you've got the rare sight of Samoa Joe and Low Ki teaming up, but then there's Low Ki facing Homicide. Seeing as they're stablemates in the Rottweilers, this is the first time they faced each other in an ROH win. As for Joe and Homicide, well, they had their own pretty heated rivalry back when Joe was the champ, so there's no love lost there. This tag match isn't quite as essential a watch as the singles bout, but it's still a damn good one, the sort of thing that'd happily work just as well on a Noah card. Naturally, Joe and Kobashi are going to go at it some more, and while there's certainly the respect between the two, they're also still going to take more lumps out of each other with chops and kicks. Homicide, who does come into this match a little banged up on his shoulder, spends a fair bit of time taking punishment. Naturally, the notorious 187 does a pretty good job of selling it. The interactions between Kobashi and Low Ki are certainly intriguing. Obviously you've got the big size difference here, and while Low Ki is still able to do some damage with his kicks, of course he's going to be the one who takes things like the big chop over the railings this time. Still, we also get to see him do things like the Rewind Wizard on Kobashi, along with a nice hand-in armbar. There is a bit more focus here on trying to work Kobashi's right arm and stopping that chop from being such a lethal weapon, and this leads on to Joe getting pretty close to a lethal cross arm breaker at one point. We also get some callbacks to last night's match. Once again, Kobashi hits some nasty discus chops on Joe and goes for the same lariat that finished him off previously, but this time Joe counters with a snap power slam. Still, even though Kobashi takes his own punishment, we do eventually get the big rally. Both Joe and Ki eat some nasty half Nelson suplexes, and Joe once again takes the goddamn sleeper suplex. Ki, somewhat ballsily, tries to go for the Ki crusher on Kobashi, but despite being unable to lift him, he dodges a discus chop and hits a John Woo. From here, he once again tries to get a submission with a flying armbar, but Homicide rushes in for a Koji cutter to break it up. That looked pretty sick. It's around here that we lead up to the finish. Joe lifts Homicide up for Ki to hit his springboard tidal wave kick, but Homicide dodges and Ki nails Joe. It's at this point where Homicide manages to take Joe out outside the ring with his magnificent rapid tope con hilo, leaving Kobashi and Ki alone. Kobashi hits the bridging powerbomb, but Ki kicks out. The difference in size allows for one pretty special move. Kobashi's able to break out the rarely used Orange Crush, something he can't really hit on other folks of his size. However, Joe just breaks up the pin. Homicide takes him out once more on the outside, and Kobashi once again looks to finish. A vicious short lariat is enough to take Loki's head off and get this match done in a really entertaining 27 minutes 36. An excellent main event to round off Kenta Kobashi's second and final appearance, complete with more respect, Joe getting on the mic to thank Kobashi profusely, and lots more arigatos from the crowd. All lovely stuff. There's no question whatsoever that this weekend was, in every possible way, a total triumph. While Joe and Kobashi certainly are the centrepiece of this bout, it has to be said that Loki does look really strong here too. He's able to get some very good stuff in on Kobashi, and there is that one moment where perhaps, if it hadn't been for Homicide's intervention, he may have been able to get a shock submission. Now, before we get to the finish, we do have a couple of other little matches from Kenta Kobashi's excursion to look at. We ought to do them here because, well, when else will we get the chance? These two matches take us back to Europe, and once again it's a British show under the FWA banner and shown on TWC that'll see another big name come along for the ride, followed by a trip to Germany and WXW. On the 12th of November 2005, the main event of FWA's Universal Uproar show at the Coventry Skydome, another show packed full of big-name talent including Mick Foley, saw the team of Kenta Kobashi and Go Shiozaki take on Doug Williams and Jun Akiyama. And yes, this is Jun Akiyama's first appearance outside of Japan. So we have two elite level guys with an incredibly storied rivalry playing out another chapter of the contest in Coventry, of all places, one of Noah's very hottest prospects in the shape of Shiozaki, and Williams, one of Britain's best at the time and also a Noah regular. And I tell you what, this match is absolutely great. It's certainly no exhibition. These teams come together for a pretty epic 30+ minute bout in front of another very hot crowd. It is kind of an odd match in many ways. It certainly feels like, at least for the first half, that Kobashi and Shiozaki are actually working heel. They're the ones getting the heat on Akiyama and Williams. We get a lot of double teams, even some referee distraction. I mean, it doesn't matter too much because the crowd are going to chant for Kobashi no matter what, but it feels like they are trying to be a bit heelish. We even get a bit of brawling on the outside, including a DDT for Shiozaki on the floor, and some very dramatic near falls as we get to the finish. We get to a stage where Kobashi and Akiyama have basically cancelled each other out, worn out to the point where they're just trying to prevent the other from getting in the ring as Williams and Shiozaki play out the finale. And after a series of big moves and reversals, it's the Anarchist who ends up getting the win following the Chaos Theory in a brilliant 31 minutes 12. An absolutely awesome match that may well even be better than the ROH tag bout, and it's a shame that it's quite obscure nowadays. Still, it is available on YouTube, and it's a definite hidden gem. Unfortunately, the show wasn't a financial success, mainly due to the cost of bringing all sorts of foreign talents in, as well as a load of TNA guys getting pulled at the last minute because TNA were worried that they wouldn't get home in time for the following night's Genesis pay-per-view. Finally, the 13th of November takes us to Essen in Germany, with Kenta Kobashi main eventing a WXW show against Ares. We only get around half the match on the upload I have available, but ROS does play a bit more of a cowardly heel, trying to sneak the advantage on Kobashi by cheap-shotting him on a handshake and the like. The coverage here mainly focuses on Kobashi's offence, which is what you would expect by this stage. A lot of chops, a few nasty suplexes and the like. Unsurprisingly, Kobashi prevails. A burning lariat is enough to bring ROS down in 17 minutes 44, of which around 9 minutes were shown, and that brings the curtain down on Kenta Kobashi's foreign excursion. Both of these matches are worth watching, with the tag being particularly excellent, although I get the feeling that events in wrestling on this weekend may have, sadly, overshadowed them a little. This is after all a weekend in which Eddie Guerrero passed. And with that, we're about at the end of this video. The immediate legacy of this foreign excursion, particularly when it came to Ring of Honor, was the formation of a very important bond between ROH and Pro Wrestling Noah, one that would bear a lot of fruit over the next couple of years. 2006 would see Kenta coming over for his absolutely brilliant one in the company. That would be followed in 2007 by Takeshi Morishima's one, where he won the ROH title. Plus we'd have a good few appearances from the likes of Go Shiozaki, Naomichi Marufuji, and indeed Mitsuharu Misawa, who'd defend the GHC heavyweight title against Kenta in an ROH win in November 2007. On the other side, you had ROH guys heading into Noah. Samoa Joe would end up having a GHC title bout against Misawa in 2007, and you'd have pretty regular appearances for awesome talents like Bryan Danielson, Nigel McGuinness, the Briscoe brothers, Chris Hero, Claudio Castagnoli. There'd be a lot of great wrestling coming from these appearances. When indie wrestling in the US started to get more and more attention in the early noughties, thanks to ROH and their ilk, big appearances from Puro talents were often more like exhibitions, as I've said. But Joe vs Kobashi in particular was a game changer. After such a strong match where everyone benefited so much from the outcome, those appearances now had to actually matter. And in the end, we got a hell of a lot of fantastic wrestling for that change. It was a marvel back then to watch it happening, and it's still a joy to look back on today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and until the next time, bye for now.